We're here at Carleton University for the EU Strategic Partnerships Workshop, and it's my pleasure to be with Dan Hamilton. He's a professor of international studies at Johns Hopkins University. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
So could you explain for us what is the basis of the EU-US strategic partnership?
Well, formally speaking, there is no strategic partnership. It's a term of art that is a formal agreement that the EU has with many countries. It doesn't actually have one with the United States. And so one has to question the very notion of the term when, in fact, you could argue that the most strategic partnership in the world is probably the US-EU relationship. So I don't think one should get hung up on the terms. One should think about what countries do together. And the fact is the U.S. and the EU have the densest, political, economic, security relationship that either has with any part of the world. The question is how do you harness that to get things done? And that's where a mechanism like a strategic partnership may or may not be useful. Sometimes it's useful to drive bureaucracies, to get people in different agencies, ministries to do things. And I think it's important to understand our relationship goes far beyond foreign affairs. It's really, we have reached so deeply into each other's societies that often our relationship is about getting domestic agencies to work together across the Atlantic. And sometimes that's not their normal habit, and a strategic partnership framework can help sort of motivate agencies to do things.
Mm-hmm. How does this fit in with the focus on networks? And Secretary Clinton has spoken about this in the past, and the State Department. How does the EU and U.S. relationship aim to harness these types of networks?
Well, Secretary Clinton's former head of policy planning, Anne-Marie Slaughter, has spoken of what she calls the disaggregated state. If you think about what an embassy is in another country, it's really a platform by which the foreign ministry or the State Department provides an umbrella under which many, many different agencies then do their work with the foreign country. So that's what that would mean. A disaggregated state means lots of different agencies. It can be the Treasury Department, it can be Homeland Security, it can be, you name it, Transportation Department, each engage with a foreign country. So how do you harness all of that and actually point it all in the same direction, and how do you provide some coherence to, of course, a disparate set of agencies? So it might be useful to think of foreign affairs as more networks than black boxes of states countries dealing with each other, especially open societies. Canada, the United States, it's our societies that are engaging all over the world, beyond government. And they are forging networks that really sustain the relationship. So if one thinks of international relations, foreign affairs as networks of people, then I think one can put government in some context and also realize what government can do, what it maybe can't do, and understand what really drives relationship among countries or people.
What's new in the EU-US relationship?
Well, we're negotiating the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is an ambitious agreement similar to what the EU has negotiated with Canada, called CETA. But given the size of the U.S. and the EU economies, this, of course, would be the biggest trade deal ever in history. And it's not just another trade agreement. Much of it is about how to find some coherence among different regulations on the United States and the EU side, not to create the same regulation, but to try to recognize that each of us have high standards. We just arrive at those standards in different ways. And if we could have some agreement across the Atlantic on those standards, they would be the benchmark for global standards. It would give us each much more leverage when we talk to China, for instance, about how it should integrate into the global economy. So that's a big issue between us. The other really big one, of course, is what Russia is doing in Europe. It's illegal annexation of the eastern Ukrainian region of Crimea. It's deployment of regular Russian army forces into Ukraine. violations of airspace, intimidation of many different countries, even buzzing North America with bombers. This has created a radically new security situation in Europe, in which we and the Europeans are very engaged. And the last, of course, new, if you will, is the continued turbulence and violence in the broader Middle East and complete tragedies that are happening there. And the question is, how does the United States, the European Union, Canada, how do we all face that tremendous zone of turmoil?
Mm-hmm. You spoke in your presentation a little bit about the TTIP being also having geopolitical elements. Could you explain that for us?
The TTIP is not just a trade agreement. It's about how the United States and the European Union should reposition themselves for the global economy going forward, not the world we left behind. It's an important affirmation of the transatlantic community. It's an important affirmation to Americans that the European Union is an outward-looking partner, ready to open its markets to American goods, services, and ideas. It's an important affirmation to the Europeans that the United States remains a European power, that its security commitments are anchored also by a strong linkage of its economic ties to Europe, and that brings added political value in terms of how the West, as I said, positions itself for the future. The TTIP, though, is also a very strong signaling device to rising powers. Those powers are debating today. Do they accommodate themselves to the international system, or do they challenge it? And so the stronger our message that we would like to integrate them into the global economy, but it's with standards that are this high and not this high, is an important message, and that we're determined to maintain those standards. That's an important message, but only if we can agree can we deliver that message. And the third important element of the TTIP geopolitically is how it relates to the international system itself. Multilateral system is under severe challenge, and the United States, Canada, the EU, we are the stewards of that system. So are we prepared, as we have in the past, to continue to write the rules for international order and support them, or are we ready to allow that to degenerate and deteriorate? And TTIP is about maintaining rules-based order at a high level, and it would have a huge impact far beyond just opening up the transatlantic market.
What are you going to be looking for in the coming years in the EU-US relationship and dialogue?
Well, I think in the TTIP negotiations, the question is, can we get an agreement, and how soon, and what are the issues? So that will preoccupy us. The second is, can the United States and the European Union work together on a whole range of issues far beyond European shores, particularly the Middle East? But if we even think about the rise of China, what is the transatlantic pivot? Could we work together for a new transatlantic agenda, working with Asian Pacific colleagues? And third, insecurity has returned to Europe itself. The notion that after the Cold War, Europe was going to live on in peace and prosperity has proved to be a paradigm lost, and that Europeans on their own, unfortunately, are not able to deal with the continent's security challenges. Only continued, sustained engagement by the United States and Canada of North America in European security matters will assure that Europe does not once again draw inordinate amounts of blood and treasure from the rest of the world. But only if we're sustained, keep our engagement up, are we likely to make that happen.
Professor Hamilton, I just want to thank you very much for your time and for being with us today.
Yeah,
Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you very much.